Introducing the Mad Cyclone, the Dancing Whirlwind, God of War, Tempest Incarnate. As you should know already, the Chuuni Lord has been added to Versus. Just so we're all on the same page here, Chuuni stands for Chunibyo, which approximately translates to something like middle schooler syndrome. There's actually quite a bit of history and meaning behind the word, but it's far more than I can cover right now or even have the ability to properly explain. For right now, if you're not already familiar with the concept, just think of it as like the sort of edgy stuff that would appeal to a middle schooler. Think of Shadow the Hedgehog, Kain from League of Legends, a demon-possessed shadow assassin, and etc. Grimnir's particular brand of Chuuni is the goofy, endearingly cringe kind. He talks in an over-the-top, grandiose manner, but will constantly flub his lines.
All the world class be fun.
Any attempt to seem dark and mysterious is offset by him being open and friendly by nature.
前の戦場で一緒に戦っただろ？あの時めちゃくちゃかっこよかったぞ。また一緒に行こう。
And his need to strike a pose at all times can make it difficult to take him seriously, even though he's an exceptionally powerful primal beast. I hope you like loud and long-winded characters, because when he was first announced, his VA went onto Twitter and made it clear that she was in the booth putting in work. Grimnir loves to monologue as he attacks, some which will last long after he has left the screen and the attack is over, along with him breaking character at the slightest slip up. Grimnir is a bit special in the fact that he's not originally from Granblue. His first appearance was actually in Cygames' original game, Rage of Bahamut. This isn't entirely unique to Grimnir, as Cygames loves to reinterpret characters between games, similar to Final Fantasy. Grimnir, however, is on the higher end of reappearances, being playable in Rage of Bahamut, Granblue Fantasy, Shadowverse, and Dragalia's Lost. Consider him a classic Cygames character, the first to be fully playable in Versus. Emphasis on fully because technically Yggdrasil be the first, thanks to Luane. Grimnir is a bit interesting in his place in Granblue's lore. Despite having occupied a potentially important role in the Skyrealm, he never really had much story presence. In order to explain this, we need to cover some Skyrealm history. Long before the start of the game, the Astrals, the race Beelzebub is a part of, descended from the stars onto the Skyrealm. Since they were far more advanced, they took control over the Skyrealm and all sky-dwelling races. They would then create the Primal Beast as a means of further cementing their rule over the Skyrealm. The original Primal Beast, referred to as Archangels, was created by an astral researcher named Lucilius. The original Archangels had significantly more power than the Primal Beasts that would come after them. So much so that some Astrals would begin to wonder if it was truly wise to give so much power to what it was essentially a slave race. Later generations would have limiters put on them, but the ones we are concerned about right now have no such thing. These are the Primarchs, Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, and Raphael. Each one was given control over an element, and they were given the role of keeping the Skyrealm stable. And there is also the Supreme Primarch Lucifer, whose role is to oversee everything. Despite having the power to cause a complete collapse of the Skyrealm, they remained loyal to their role. Even after Lucilius would lead some of their fellow Archangels to rebel against the Astrals, even after the Astrals would eventually lose a war against the Skyfarers some several hundred years before the beginning of the game, and basically disappear from the Skyrealm. And they continued to fulfill their role, even going so far as to take on other primal beasts who had considerable influence over the elements as disciples, to act as their proteges and aid in balancing the elements. Those disciples are Alexio for Uriel, Europa for Gabriel, Shiva for Michael, and Grimnir for Raphael. So why does Grimnir and the disciples feel like such minor characters despite being tied to the Primarchs, who are important figures in the world of Granblue and major characters in the What Makes the Sky Blue storyline, which is probably still the biggest in Granblue, and the one Versus is based off of? Well, they just weren't around for it. Originally, Grimnir and the disciples were added to Granblue Fantasy as summons. And there's no real story behind that. Summons are purely gameplay. They come in during battle, do an attack, buff the party, and that's it. Our first real introduction to them isn't until sometime later when they get added as raid bosses. Once you've made it a little over halfway through the main story, the MC has made a pretty big reputation for themselves. More importantly, they are on good terms with the Primarchs. The Primarch's disciples, wanting to see what all the fuss is about, comes by and challenges the MC to some trials, in order to see what they're capable of firsthand. However, these encounters with them are very brief. Kind of a high and buy type deal. This was mostly just set up for them to serve as mid-game raid bosses and a little sneak peek into what type of characters they are before they eventually became playable. The first disciple to become playable, Alexia, wasn't released until we were already 2 parts deep into the What Makes the Sky Blue storyline. Grimnir wasn't actually playable until after we had already gotten the finale for What Makes the Sky Blue. And while a character doesn't have to be playable in order to appear in story events, adding characters who most people wouldn't be familiar with at the time late into the storyline probably wouldn't be for the best, especially since What Makes the Sky Blue was already packed with characters fighting for screen time. This is a pretty big missed opportunity for the Disciples due to how large of a role the Primarchs played throughout the entirety of the storyline. And to add on to that, in the end, the Primarchs decide to give up their Keeper of the Elements roles. They come to the decision that the Sky Realm no longer needs their influence and starts to integrate themselves into Skyfarer society, which in turn lowers the importance of the Disciples. Well, enough of that, let's get into Grimnir's Fate episodes. Our introduction to Grimnir joining the crew is the MC being woken up in the middle of the night due to Grimnir's voice. A funny bit about this is the same way Grimnir approaches MC to put him through a trial. So there's this feeling of, here we go again. Whenever Grimnir and the Disciples would approach the MC for a trial, they would always show up in the middle of the night while the MC was in a dreamlike state. So once Grimnir makes his presence known, the MC heads up to the deck, half asleep, ready to square up. Lyria and V also come up to the deck, startled by the initial commotion, but then just spend the rest of the time confused once they actually meet Grimnir. Grimnir greets them with familiarity, but they have no clue who he is, and to make it worse, his Chuuni routine doesn't land with them at all. Lyria tries to entertain him but ultimately doesn't understand what he's trying to do, and V just isn't having any of it. Grimnir then drops a persona in order to explain the situation. Raphael had him sent over because he believes spending time with the crew would be a good opportunity for Grimnir's growth. The three aren't ones to turn people down, so Grimnir is given a warm welcome to the crew. This is also pretty much how the recruitment for Alexiel and Europa go. The only real difference is their associated Primarch accompanies them to the ship, kinda like a parent dropping their kid off at daycare. Grimnir's next few Fate episodes are nothing special. Grimnir, the MC, Lyria, and V are out doing an odd job delivering supplies for a remote mountain village. While on their way up, a boy from the village comes down to give them a warning about an imminent blizzard and to act as a guide to hopefully speed up their pace. Even with the warning, the blizzard is much worse than they thought. The area is pretty much wiped out in an instant, causing the crew to get separated when the boy is blown away and the MC starts to chase after. The MC is able to save the boy, but they both fall into a crevice. Grimnir is also separated from Lyria and V, but uses his wind powers to create a safe zone inside the blizzard. Some nearby monsters try to take advantage of the situation and attack, but they're no match for the mad cyclone. Once the monsters are taken care of, he's able to focus on reuniting with everybody else, and once they're all together, they're able to arrive at the village and finish the job. Now that would be the end, but this past month, Grimnir just got his 5th star uncapped, so we got a little bit more story to cover. And it's actually pretty good. We get to learn about Grimnir before he became a disciple. The Fate episodes start with the crew receiving a request for aid from both sides of a war breaking out between two small nations. The crew does some research on the situation and find out that two nations have been on good terms up until very recently. Grimnir, the MC, Lyria, and V head out to the battlefield, not in order to aid one side, but to see if there's a way to bring this conflict to a peaceful resolution. Fighting has already broken out, so they spend their time on the outskirts looking to see if they can find any information on what's going on. While looking around, Grimnir comes across an unfamiliar winged woman praying for a fallen soldier, asking for his soul to be guided to Valhalla. Thinking she might be behind the conflict, Grimnir confronts her, and the unknown woman seems to be very familiar with Grimnir. The moment she sees him, she's pissed. She mutters a traitor remark before seemingly talking to someone in the sky, informing whoever it is that Grimnir has just arrived. Once his name is said, what was a clear sky is instantly filled with storm clouds. Lyria can sense something big is on its way, and that's when he appears, the primal beast Odin. Odin arrives with a crash of thunder, but doesn't come off as hostile. Upon seeing Grimnir, he refers to him as his other half, and speaks in somewhat of a reminiscing tone. Odin gives a warning not to interfere, that this war is their hunting ground to find warriors for Valhalla. While he's not eager to do so, he will have no hesitation in striking Grimnir and the crew down. The crew refuses to back down from what is obviously the source of the conflict and prepares for battle. However, this fight doesn't last long. Odin immediately sends his spear Gungnir flying at Grimnir, who is completely overwhelmed by it. The MC leaps after the wounded Grimnir, and Lyria summons the primal beast Tiamat to catch them both. They then make a hasty retreat from the area. Odin makes no effort to chase after, rather he seems intrigued by those who would protect Grimnir. He then wishes blessings upon to Grimnir under his breath, before turning back to the battlefield. The next scene is a flashback, taken us several hundred years before the start of a game, to a pre-war sky realm when the Astrals still ruled. It opens up with the very first moments of Grimnir's life. Odin is there to greet him and explain what's going on. Odin is the god of war and thunder. He's a primal beast given the role of gathering up the souls of fallen mortal warriors and bringing them to the island of Valhalla. There, they will be bent to his will and trained in order to form an army to subjugate the Sky Dwellers, at the command of the Astrals. There is one issue they're having. Relying on the natural conflicts of the Sky Realm to provide the souls of warriors isn't quite fast enough. So Odin took a portion of himself and created an alter ego, Grimnir, to be his man on the ground, the tempest before his thunder. Odin deemed it necessary to fan the flames of war themselves. both indirectly and directly. Next, we skip forward a few times, just watching different moments of Grimnir serving under Odin. From these, we get to learn a lot about the relationship, which I actually enjoyed quite a bit. Odin is a very serious and commanding person, but is never strict with a very goofy Grimnir, who at this point doesn't have his whole Chuuni persona. Odin comes off as a concerned older brother more than anything. We get to see Grimnir reporting back to Odin after a mission, but it ends up seeming more like a child excitedly showing off a test they got an A on. This causes a bit of concern from Odin. He purposely made Grimnir friendly as part of his job is to interact with sky dwellers and gather information, but there's absolutely zero authority in the way he conducts himself. Grimnir's idea to fix this is to start using cooler sounding language in order to imitate Odin, which Odin just responds back with a concerned look before we move on. Next we see a scene of Odin teaching Grimnir the importance of literature and how learning the different perspectives of sky dwellers is important to their goal. We fast forward a little bit again and Grimnir is mainly into fiction novels, specifically an isekai about some wizard. Odin claims that those books have corrupted his speech, but Grimnir kinda just brushes it off, saying that Odin also enjoyed them when Grimnir showed them to him. Grimnir promises to bring back the sequel before heading out on a mission, and Odin wishes him more blessings. Our next time skip is a lot larger, to a period where the Sky Dwellers' war against the Astrals have already begun. Grimnir now spends most of his days on the battlefield, cutting down Sky Dwellers, which is really starting to wear on him. Grimnir isn't new to having conflict with the Sky Dwellers, but is wondering how necessary all this killing is now. Especially with how much he's interacted with Sky Dweller culture at this point, he begins to question why they shouldn't be able to coexist with the Astrals. Grimnir takes this up with Odin, but he dismisses the thought. As far as he's concerned, the Sky Dwellers are inferior to the Astrals and deserve to be ruled by them. And as primal beasts, they should just continue to fulfill their role. Unfortunately, that's not enough for Grimnir. We skip forward again towards the end of the war, and Grimnir is confronting Odin one last time. Grimnir questions if the Astrals should even rule the Sky Realm, and declares that he'll no longer participate in the war, being ready to face Odin's anger if necessary. But rather than be upset, Odin is just amazed at how Grimnir, his other half, could turn out so different from him. He respects Grimnir's wishes to leave, and the last thing we see is him ruffling Grimnir's hair before the flashback ends. The next scene takes us back to the present. Grimnir is still recovering from the encounter with Odin, and informs the crew on the flashback he had, which he interpreted as a dream. Against the crew's wishes, he tries to get up and go back to confront Odin. However, that is all put to end when the Primarch Raphael shows up with a big gust of wind rocking the ship. Raphael came over because he could sense something wrong happening with his disciple. Grimnir and the crew try to inform him on what recently happened, but that is not his concern. Rather, a seal that had been placed on Grimnir is coming undone. The seal was placed on him even before Raphael had first found him after the war, most likely done by Odin, locked away both his memories and a tremendous amount of his former power. Raphael had made Grimnir his disciple because he was concerned about leaving a primal beast to wander around aimlessly with so much potential strength. Raphael could undo the seal, but he was concerned about his disciple's ability to control such power. So Grimnir asked him to put him through a trial, similar to one Raphael had did to the MC in the past. Grimnir claims victory and Raphael undoes the seal, thus returning him to his former glory.
Perfect!
With his power restored and his memory now intact, Grimnir leads the crew to Valhalla to put a stop to Odin. While the crew is en route, Odin and the woman we now know as Skuld are finishing the last bit of prep needed to enact Odin's plan. Since the end of the war, Odin has continued to fulfill his purpose and gather souls to build his army. After watching countless conflicts arise after the disappearance of the Astrals, Odin has come to the conclusion that the Sky Dwellers can't govern themselves. The sky should be ruled by the stars, and if there's no Astrals to govern, he'll do it himself. His plan is to wipe out the two warring nations and use them as the first foothold in expanding his control across the Sky Realm. Once the crew arrives, their plan is simple. Since there's no way for them to take on Odin and his army at the same time, they're going to use their airship, the Grand Cypher, as a distraction. Grimnir and the MC are then going to sneak around and confront Odin 2-on-1. The distraction part goes smoothly. The Grand Cypher is a former Astral warship. Its size alone is enough to draw the attention of Odin's army. However, getting Odin alone isn't so simple. Grimnir and the MC decide to take to the skies to keep the army from being able to interfere. However, Odin sees through this. Instead of chasing after them, he stays grounded and repeatedly launches his spear Gungnir at them. Grimnir, back at full power, is able to repel all of Odin's attack, which causes Odin's soft spot for Grimnir to once again take over. The now excited Odin takes after the two and gives them the fight they wanted. The battle with Odin is not an easy one. With his overwhelming offensive power, there is almost no room for the pair to attack. Grimnir decides to focus on defense in order to give the MC an opening. The fighting is even until Odin finds an opening on Grimnir. Grimnir braces for a devastating strike, but Odin switches to his real target, the MC, who is now defenseless. However, this is what the duo wanted. The MC is narrowly able to avoid the attack, giving Grimnir the chance to land his Spirit Vortex of the Void into Odin's back, sending the Primal Beast crashing into the ground. The two go down to talk to Odin, and he's shocked at how he could be defeated by some Sky Dweller. Grimnir tries to convince Odin of the potential of the Sky Dwellers and how they should be able to live among them. Odin still doesn't believe this, however, as to defeat it, he says he doesn't get an opinion in the matter. So with a snap of his fingers, he dismisses the souls bound to him, allowing them to pass on. Odin is shocked to see a small portion of his army still remains. Those who stay do so out of their own volition, truly having faith in Odin as a ruler. Not enough to pose a threat though. He gives a warning that he's strengthened by every foolish conflict with the Sky Dwellers before parting with Grimnir again. The story ends with the crew regrouping and Grimnir wishing that Odin could one day connect with the Sky Dwellers. And that wraps it up. This one took way longer than I had anticipated, but thanks for watching, and Nier is next.